We hit our target in 24 hours. We raised 20 grand in 24 hours. By the 48-hour mark, we almost doubled it. We were nearing 30 grand in total donations collected, which was incredible. The timing was perfect. We launched it right around the Feast of St. Joseph the Worker. And I had the crazy idea that we could get the thing done within 3 months. So we raised the money, great. And in the video, this is where I made my misstep.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where we discover how to run your business like a saint. Today, we are speaking with Daniel Egan, a good friend of mine, about how he spearheaded the St. Joseph the Worker mural in Detroit that was just completed in late 2024. The reason I wanted Dan to share about this journey of creating this mural is so that it can serve as a sort of guide for others who want to do projects like this. Dan and I are both firm believers that we need to reassert the faith into the world in kind of visible ways, and a great way to do that is through murals or other projects similar to this, right? So if you are somebody who shares that mentality, this is a really good episode for you, because in it, Dan shares what the project is, how it came to his mind in the first place, and then he walks us through all of the hurdles they ran into before finally completing it, right? If you hear those hurdles, you know what to avoid for yourself when you do it. Then at the end, towards the end, he ends up breaking down kind of the core ingredients as to what it takes to make a project like this successful. So again, this is a great way to learn from his experience and to kind of see this as a guide so that you can implement it when you're going to build a mural or something similar to it to, again, bring beauty to the world and to bring others back to the faith. One thing before we do get into the show, if you are looking for a community of other Catholic entrepreneurs, join the Catholic Founders Guild today. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. Just click upgrade to paid in our Substack today and we'll get you in the group. There's a lot more coming. We're cooking on a lot of different things, so I would recommend joining now. The prices are likely to go up in the near future, but if you get in soon, you'll get a big discount. So enjoy the show with Dan, and we'll see you in the Catholic Founders Guild as well. All right, Dan, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thanks, man. It's good to see you, Silas. Happy to make time for this discussion.
Absolutely. It's about time that we actually did something like in earnest together, because we've been talking for forever.
Yeah,
I'm
dude.
finally glad to get you on the pod.
I feel like I've known you since you were in the very beginning of your what now
Oh
is
yeah, man.
becoming a very illustrious business career. So I'm so happy to see you grow over time, and it's been just great to see your progress and do what I can to support you along the way.
Man, you're too kind. I appreciate your mentorship along the way. It's very timely that Ken Stein introduced us, because it's always
Yeah,
nice to have people who you can look up to and who can teach you a few things, right? So
so true, brother.
obviously I know you. I think there probably will be some people who listen who know you, but just give a quick background on who you are and what you're up to today, and then we'll get into what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I'm a son of the church, proud Roman Catholic, husband, father of two screaming kiddos, and working on that growing family and trying to figure out the art and science of parent craft. That keeps us busy for sure. And from a professional standpoint, my day job, I am the vice president and CMO of a venture capital private equity firm called Forest Solutions. We're based here in Detroit, and we invest in home service companies primarily. And I oversee the technology infrastructure, but primarily the marketing strategy around our companies across the US. And it's been a wild ride. My formal education is in philosophy and English literature. So this has been an incredible time. I've been with the company now for about 10 years, and I've grown up along the way and learned on the job just the ins and outs of business, while also kind of applying just sound Catholic and theological and philosophical perspectives to it all, which has been really valuable because after my time in college, I spent some time in seminary where I got my philosophical and theological education. So it's been unbelievably valuable. In addition to that, I'm something of a serial side hustler. I've always got a bunch of little projects on the back burner and sometimes on the forefront of my mind. And one of these is the Joseph mural. The worker mural is what we've come to call it. And I'm more than happy to get into all those stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll talk about this. So there's kind of like I'll let you clarify this and everything, but a high level intro is that, Dan here, he basically had the idea and really, I guess you'd say, spearheaded the project and facilitated the creation of a large mural to St. Joseph in Detroit. And I wanted to ask him to come on to kind of break down how he did that, what he would do differently, and effectively lay out the framework, if you will, on how to do this again, because Dan and I share this idea that we need to fight in the culture war, at least bring God back into the culture, right? And we see all these, murals are becoming a really popular thing to do in cities. I don't know, millennials just really like art, I guess. But we need a little bit more of it to be Catholic, right? So that's what we're going to break down today. If you guys have not already heard of this, it's going to be a Going to be a good episode for you. So I guess let's start kind of at the end. So tell us the outcome of the project, then we'll back up to the beginning and walk through the origins and everything.
Yes, begin with the end in mind. We have right outside my window here. Not only can I see the steeple of my church, St. Joseph Shrine in downtown Detroit, but also we have a nearly 40-foot tall, 18-foot wide mural of St. Joseph the Worker, which we completed in late 2024. That was designed from the very beginning to bring beauty, to your point, into the city, into an area of Detroit that was already known for its street art and its murals. But unsurprisingly, unfortunately, there wasn't any Catholic influence in that street art scene. And our church being right across the street from this market, it's called Eastern Market. It's one of the oldest, longest established farm markets in any major city. Our church has been there since the 1800s, and it only made sense to me that as our church community was growing, as we were trying to find new ways to expand our sphere of influence within the city, that getting a little piece of the action in the urban art street scene was made a lot of sense.
Yeah. So where? Let's go back then. Now, where did the idea come from? Because you finished in. I remember you finishing at the end of 24, and I remember you taking the video of you out there in the absolute blistering Detroit winter, trying to talk about it. But where did this start? When did this start? What year? Give us the timeline.
So anyone who knows me, and you would know this too, Silas, I'm an ideas guy. And I don't know where they come from. I don't know when they even come to me, but they come. And they haunt me sometimes. Sometimes they're big ideas, sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not so great. A big part of me trying to mature in my professional life is trying to figure out what to do with all these ideas. You can't do everything. Certainly can't do everything at once. You certainly need a good team of people to execute on any ambitious dream. So like to tell you exactly when this idea came to me, I can't tell you. I will say when our parish church, St. Joseph Shrine, was given to the care of the Institute of Christ the King, which is a traditional religious order here in the US, and they're all over the country, all over the world. When they came into this church, which was nearly ready to close its doors, they injected so much new life and energy. It was a beautiful thing. And I was born and raised in Detroit and committed to being here. But as I was moving on with my life, realizing that I was going to want to start a family and kind of put roots somewhere where I could have a real good Catholic parish home. To be honest with you, in 2016, I was kind of coming up short. Like I didn't know exactly where I wanted to be because I didn't find a good parish in my own city, unfortunately. That all changed when the Institute came in. Everything changed. And Canon Stein, who you mentioned earlier, was our first pastor, and he just injected so much life and vitality into this old, beautiful German Gothic church. And so, in working with him, collaborating with him, trying to get him introduced and connected to the right people in the city, where I had already had a lot of meaningful connections, I kind of think this idea just kind of developed organically. What can we do as a parish church to be more visible in the broader neighborhood? How can we show that this church is here for everyone, and that how can we demonstrate the beauty of the church, which you can see inside and exteriorly, but how can we bring more of that beauty to the actual streets that people can touch and see and get a taste of what's to come? So the initial idea was, why don't we just like get a wall somewhere in Eastern Market to paint a beautiful image of our church and maybe St. Joseph and put mass times? I quickly realized that wasn't complying with city ordinances that would classify it as an ad or a billboard, and so you'd have to go through all this permitting to get that. But what I did find is that Detroit has a unique ordinance that basically gives artists and muralists carte blanche. They can do whatever they want. They don't need to get permits or anything. As long as they have the permission of the building owner, they can paint basically anything as long as it's classified as not offensive, which is its own kind of subjective term. But once I determined that, I think I want to say if I had to give a year to it, it was probably around 2019 or so when I kind of put together what this might potentially look like. It was then when the wheels started turning. Okay, how can we actually do this thing? And it wasn't until after the craziness of the pandemic died down in 2021 when we launched our big crowdfunding campaign, and it really took off like wildfire. And then we had a bunch of obstacles, which I'm sure we can touch on.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I think we've covered pretty much the beginnings right here. So let's go through those. Like walk us kind of one by one, just recalling the timeline. Because I don't know if you've actually gotten the chance to do this in a public situation, but kind of walk through all the challenges you came into, and how you guys overcame those, and what you would do differently, obviously, to avoid those challenges in the future if you're doing this again.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm an ideas guy, like I said, but I also pride myself in and being a go-getter and erring on the side of action. In the case of this project, in hindsight, what we should have done better is we should have really fleshed out all of the details and had more firm agreements with the various stakeholders involved. We had some handshake agreements, and that was about it. And so I can speak to specifically how that hurt us. I put my marketing skill sets and expertise to the project. I surrounded myself with a good group of creatives, and we put together a really compelling video ad campaign. We did 2 or 3 different videos that were filmed in a way that I just knew would take off like wildfire in Catholic Twitter and the other kind of Catholic social spaces. And it absolutely met my expectations. It was a really compelling and somewhat hilarious, self-deprecating. I was the face of it.
It was good. I have to say, I still remember those videos.
Yeah, like it's one of my professional career. This is like quasi professional. It's professional adjacent. Like in my creative career as a marketer, it's one of the things I'm most proud of. Unfortunately, it was short lived because you won't actually find the video anymore because we had to remove it for reasons I'll get into. The long story short is it hit our target audience perfectly. It resonated with everyone that I was looking to get it in front of, and we raised all the money we needed. We had a budget of 20,000 that we needed to raise, and then the idea was all the money raised on top of that would go to the St. Joseph Shrine Historic Renewal Campaign, basically the capital campaign to rebuild the church. At that time, we were restoring the steeple and the bell tower and all that stuff. We hit our target in 24 hours. We raised 20 grand in 24 hours, and then by the 48-hour mark, we'd almost doubled it. We were nearing 30 grand in total total donations collected, which was incredible. And like we had donations from all over the world, from Sweden, Ireland, I mean, lots of the US, of course. But it was mostly actually outside of Detroit, which was really encouraging. We were very clear that this is a Detroit based project. And we tied it to, at the time, Pope Francis had declared 2021 the year of St. Joseph. And so we tied it to that, and like the timing was perfect. We launched it right around the feast of St. Joseph the Worker. And I had the crazy idea that we could get the thing done within 3 months. So we raised the money, great. And in the video, this is where I made my misstep. I somewhat recklessly implied that the wall in the backdrop of a portion of the video was going to be the actual wall that we would paint the mural. It was in the DeQuinder Cut, which is a public park. It's adjacent to St. Joseph Shrine. It's an urban greenway. It's a very heavily trafficked running, biking, family setting. It goes from Eastern Market all the way to the riverfront. It's just a great little corridor in the city, great public space. And I figured, hey, why not have a mural of St. Joseph the Worker on one of these concrete walls, and right above it is St. Joseph's Shrine? It'd be perfect. And I had a tacit kind of handshake agreement with the folks that oversee that park to do this. And that was all well and good, or so I thought. In the video itself, the misstep was in the background, there was some graffiti. And unbeknownst to me, this graffiti was actually of historical significance to some of the OGs in the Detroit street art community.
Mm.
And the graffiti was actually maintained and preserved from before it was the DeQuinder Cut, before they turned this area of the city into a public park. That graffiti was there back when it was train tracks. And it was by this small but vocal minority of Detroit artists. It was very much cherished. And the implication in the video, although I didn't say it explicitly, the implication that a lot of people were left with of that particular background was that I was going to whitewash that graffiti and put our mural on top of it. That was never the intention. The intention was always to work directly with the DeQuinder Cut to find the right place to do it, to not ruffle any feathers. But from a PR standpoint, that was a real misstep. And consequently, we got a lot of serious negative backlash, like really vicious. So much so that I was somewhat scared. And the artist that we had commissioned to do the work was actually getting doxxed on social and being, criticized for being involved in this project, blah, 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 blah. It was a mess. We had to make we had to make the campaign a lot less visible overnight in order to protect the project. We had raised all this money. There was a lot of excitement among Catholics to get this thing done, but we definitely had a PR issue on our hands that we had to address. And that caused a whole series of dominoes to fall that we had to deal with. So this tacit agreement I had with the DeQuinder Cut fell through. they didn't want to have anything to do with the project after that point. It was, from their standpoint, this was,
It was getting
um,
dicey.
yeah, it was kryptonite for them. They just didn't want to touch it. So we had to scramble. We had to iterate. We had to figure out what do we do from here. And I give Cannon Stein a lot of credit because I sat down with him after all this went down because we had so much early success. And then all of a sudden we had all this negative backlash. It was hard for me to process and make sense of it all.
I mean,
But he, yeah,
you would usually assume that like the money would be the hardest part, probably, right? But it was
exactly.
like you guys had done a good job, so it's like it's very funny to hear some of the the reverse order of issues.
Exactly. And like with any significant project, you have a vision, you do your best to formulate the game plan, the plan of attack. It's like that favorite Mike Tyson expression, like, everyone's got a game plan until they get punched in the face, and then like everything changes. You do your best to plan, and then you got to iterate, you got to adapt. And so sitting down with Ken Stein, on a spiritual point, like he just said, look, the fact that you're getting this much backlash is the surest sign that you're right over the target. This is the sort of initiative that's got to get done. The fact that you've got a lot of haters, so called, it just means that this is something that is really worth pursuing. If it was easy, anyone would do it and would already be there. The fact that it's difficult means it's something that we gotta um, we gotta kind of dust ourselves off and figure out another way to do it. So that led us on to a whole series of months that turned into years to find a new location for the mural. Once again, we had handshake agreements with other building owners in the vicinity of the neighborhood. By the end of 2021, I had what I thought was a firm agreement with a building owner right next door to the shrine. Beautiful wall, right on Gratiot. It would have been awesome. And we had a handshake agreement. He was super excited about the project. I introduced him to the artist. We had multiple meetings and lunches. And then his business partner and his ex-wife joined the final meeting when I actually provided the real succinct one-page just summary of the terms of the agreement. He didn't have to put any money in. It was just us. We were going to foot all the costs and take care of all the hassle. This was just going to make his building remarkable. It was a very bland, uninteresting building, but all of a sudden we're going to put this beautiful mural on it. Um, I don't think I would be misstating it. Say like the fact that it was so explicitly Catholic turned him off. It not so much him, but his wife or his ex-wife, and that was all hairy and messy. So for a while, he was stringing us along, thinking we might be able to make it work, and change the design a little bit here or there. But ultimately, I just determined this was not going to be a good fit. And once again, I had to kind of dust myself off and go back to the drawing board and figure out what plan C was going to be. At that point, we were thinking about actually building our own structure, our own billboard. I won't get into the details of all of our plans. That fell through. Then we had another building agreement with another guy close to our parish who was also initially really excited and actually signed a written agreement. And then once we showed him a conceptual design of it, once again, because it was so explicitly Catholic, and it really wasn't over the top, it was St. Joseph in his workshop and Our Lady and our Lord, like with halos. Like it was clearly Catholic imagery, but it wasn't offensive. Like,
Yeah.
but the fact that it was explicitly Catholic, for whatever reason, they weren't amenable to it. And so, again, it took months and months to get that agreement established, only to when we're nearly closing the deal, they turn off and tell us they're not interested. It was only at that point, and credit to my good buddy Josh Panzik, who deserves a lot of credit for keeping the flames of this project lit. Because to be honest with you, I was despairing. It was a real test of my faith and confidence that this actually was going to get done. But Josh really did save the day. We sat down in early 2024 and identified all the potential buildings and locations around the church that could work. We'd already done this before, but it was worth revisiting the list. And there were some buildings that had changed hands in recent months. And so we did our best to identify all the possible locations. And we did our best to collect contact information, names, and numbers. And believe it or not, we found a guy, Jewish guy, who owns a big warehouse right across the street from our church, right on Gratiot. And he actually, interestingly enough, was dealing with a similar sort of PR issue that I was, because he had had some negative press due to some controversial changes he had made to increasing rent on some of
Mhm.
the retail and restaurant businesses in the neighborhood that he owned. And between you and me, I actually think his rates and increases were reasonable. It's not like he was trying to push anyone out. He was just trying to bring the rates up to market level. But he had a PR issue on his hands, and he was looking to do anything he could to support this neighborhood in a positive way in order to improve his public image. And so when we began having conversations with him and realized that was a need, we really worked carefully to pitch this proposal in a way that would make this a win-win, a textbook deal where we're trying to make both parties come out ahead at the end of it. And the long story long, we engaged with our attorneys, got some very simple legalese set up and some expectations. We got the artist involved, and it took us another 4 months. And then we had to deal with the Michigan Department of Transportation because they were giving us crap because we didn't have the proper permits for the lift that was required to complete the mural. There's a whole bunch of obstacles that I'm probably going to forget. We just had to keep knocking them down one by one by one. It was really a testament to, I believe, St. Joseph's intercession. He wanted this to happen in his time, in Almighty God's time. And, the amazing thing, Silas, at the end of this project, the location of the mural, where it ended up, was a location that had never occurred to me. I'd never thought of, and it really wasn't on my radar until we sat down and revisited things in 2024. But believe it or not, it is a location that is so perfect because not only does it overlook our church, and you can see it from the parking lot of our church overlooking the neighborhood, but it also oversees a new 5-acre parcel of land that our church just acquired. But we're going to be building our new school, hopefully a monastery for the nuns in the future, as well as a public park to benefit the entire city, and of course our parish. And this mural of St. Joseph the Worker is perfectly placed to oversee that new development and that new construction. So it was in God's time, it was in his hands, and clearly St. Joseph had other ideas when it came down to it as far as where he wanted this thing located. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it's just amazing how everything all worked out. It really is a testament to God working in his own time, and still at the same time, expecting us to act, and to take steps forward, even when things are difficult and they don't look like, there's an end in sight to the constant rejection. By the grace of God, we got it done. And credit to my team for just kind of keeping me focused and encouraging me to just keep taking those next steps.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this. This is a great walkthrough, and especially the ending where it's like, hey, in the end, it turned out to be a better location than we in our human wisdom originally planned. But obviously, there's a lesson for you as the lead of this project through that experience. But if somebody else wants to do this and wants to try to avoid the hiccups, if you were to kind of look back now, what would you say are the core ingredients to getting it done and the kind of core order of things that you would go if you were to advise somebody, hey, you want to do something similar, whether it's a mural or something related? I guess we can focus on the mural piece because there's going to be different regulations for other stuff. But what are the core things that should really be focused on and in what order?
So, like we said before, begin with the end in mind. What is it that you actually want to accomplish? And get detailed, get specific. In my case, initially, it was just a billboard to promote mass times. And then, you investigate the feasibility of that and you realize, okay, that's actually not technically feasible. But what can we do? So the first thing, cast the vision and then test it, play it out. Is this actually possible? That's going to take some time. You got to figure out, depending on the city that you're in and the municipality that you're working in, those regulations and ordinances are going to be very different. Detroit is very lenient when it comes to art projects. But other cities, New York, Chicago, I've talked to some people that have been considering that. It's not the same story. So you really do need to understand what is and what isn't possible. The other thing that is mission critical, of course, is the location side of it, and making sure early on that in order for the project to go smoothly, you've got to have written agreements before you're ever raising money with the actual property owner. If it's your own property, great. But I think in most cases, when people are going to be executing these projects, you're going to have to get good relationships with the actual building owners, and then you do going to bring in some legal advice, I think, to just determine in succinct language exactly what the expectations are, and just for liability purposes, but also just get everyone on the same page, literally, so that you don't have any hiccups and surprises along the way. That if there was one big misstep, that was it. I just kind of gave everyone the benefit of the doubt that they had good intentions, and I think they did. But the fact that we didn't have any official documentation to rely on, it made things a lot more difficult. So once you knock out those things, it is important to get the right artist on board. Absolutely, if we're going to produce Catholic art, if we're going to try to bring the transcendental of beauty into the public space. If you're going to ask me, you need to make sure you have an artist that's actually capable of doing those things. Just because someone is a street artist or a muralist doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to produce good Catholic art. And so one of the real blessings of this project is that I got introduced to a man by the name of Elton Monroy Duran, who is our muralist and world renowned, very famous, based here in Detroit, and Catholic. And with that comes a Catholic sensibility, a Catholic ethos, an understanding of who the man of St. Joseph is in the case of this mural. So like I didn't have to educate him on what Catholic art looks like. He knew very, very, very clearly from the beginning. In fact, he wanted to tell me about St. John Paul II's encyclical directed towards artists, which he was very inspired by in the early days of his career, where St. John Paul II makes the point that the fine arts, and one who actually is in the business of creating art, that's actually a vocation. And that's actually something that can provide grace and can sanctify and can be a very meaningful role in the world. And so he was super invigorated by that. And I think that encyclical was largely what brought him back to the church, believe it or not. And so he was super excited when he got the call from me to be involved in this, because he'd really never up to that point done anything explicitly Catholic. Getting that right, getting the vision right, working through the feasibility of it, getting the legal side of it right, getting the agreements with the owners of the building that you're going to be painting on, and then making sure you got the right creative mind to execute the thing. And then I think it should go without saying, but a project like this is almost impossible to do on your own. You need to support yourself with a good team, not only from a legal standpoint. It's not a lot of legal work, but you do need to have some advice along the way there. In my case, I had someone who largely took over the communication with the actual business owner, kind of made sure that expectations were clear, because as much as the project is very straightforward, there's still a lot of moving parts, and you want to make sure, insofar as an initiative like this is producing Catholic art, like you, in a very real way, are an ambassador of the church, and so you need to make sure that you're representing the church and being professional and courteous and communicating well to all the various stakeholders. So it's hard to do that all by yourself, and so making sure you've got a good right hand man or woman to help you along the way is mission critical. So I kind of think, in hindsight, that's probably the formula.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, on top of that, once you have all that squared away, then you're figuring out how are we going to fund this thing. Once all those ducks are in a row, then the funding is just a marketing problem. And at least for me, that's much more straightforward and easy, relatively speaking.
Yeah. So I do want to, I was going to ask you that because I figured that because of the way this thing went for you, that you would say, hey, that was relatively easy for me. Other people might struggle, but were there any parts of the process that were made much easier because you guys already had you had already raised the money? Would it have been much more difficult to get people to think you're serious without having the money? Like, is that something that you would have had to run into if it was reversed?
It's a good question. And because I didn't have the experience of not having the money, I can't speak to that
Exactly. Yeah.
experientially, right? The fact that we had the funds raised was definitely some leverage. It definitely gave us some leverage when it came to telling the business owner, hey, we've already got the funds ready to do this. We can have this project completed by X date. That made it a lot easier, I think, to convince him that this is going to be some lingering project that he's going to have to manage and oversee for a long period of time. And certainly having the funds raised also made it easier for the artist to know that he was going to get paid. Because that's also a point I should emphasize. I'm a big believer that even if it's Catholic work, this is a craftsman who has a
Mm-hmm.
family and to support. Like this, just because you're doing work that's adjacent to the church does not mean it should be pro bono. If he wanted to, fair enough. But I want to emphasize that Catholic artists and Catholic tradesmen need to be compensated appropriately for their time. It's a matter of justice. And so, to your point, Silas, I do think there's something to be said for having money allocated already going in. If that is something you can arrange without damaging the reputation of the project, certainly, if you could have conversations with donors before you even launch the thing to, assure the stakeholders and the people that you're trying to get committed to supporting the project, letting them know that, hey, we've already got like $15,000 committed to this. I think that would go a long way, because one of the issues I did have is I raised a lot of money, thousands and thousands of dollars from people all over the country and world, and when they didn't see the project coming to
Yeah.
fruition, they were getting concerned, and like my reputation was on the line, and like it was keeping me up at night because I realized so many people trusted me with their money, and here I am 3 years later and we don't have the thing done. Yeah, to your point, it probably doesn't make sense to go public with it. At least the big mistake I'll make, and I'll just clarify this, the big mistake I made is implying that we already have a location determined, right? That was the big mistake. You could launch the campaign and say, hey, look, we're actively looking for a location and we're actively raising money. I think you could do both but making sure that along the way you get the legal stuff right, you get the formal agreements signed up with the business owners. I do think that makes a lot of sense. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the building first. I think you could do both of them simultaneously, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, as long as you make
Yeah.
sure you got your everything organized.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I can imagine if you had put that same exact marketing spin and how you did it, but just kind of reworded a few things just slightly differently in a way that knowing what you know now, it probably would have been a much cleaner outcome,
You're
and
exactly right.
you still could have raised the money because it's for those types of marketing things. And I don't know how we're gonna get people to see this. If you guys want to build one of these projects, maybe Dan has the footage he can send to you privately. But
Yeah,
the point is,
I'd be happy to. Just don't post it on X or LinkedIn or
exactly.
anything.
If
Yeah.
you want to get an idea, it's kind of like the some of like the what's the like the Dr. Squatch type of that really attention grabbing marketing, right? Like that kind of interesting thing. So
Yeah.
anyways, the point being, you can do that, and you can just do it with like a little bit more of a legal mind to it. Like, hey, how can we not upset any people along the way? And then you can still raise the money. So I do think that this is a really good breakdown and walkthrough. And again, the whole reason we're doing this is we want people listening to realize, hey, how can you do this? So if you're listening to this and thinking, hey, is there a particular place in mind that I have that I could do this? Start really turning those wheels and reach out to us if you have interest in doing this. We love to, at least I personally would love to be able to try to break down some of these things that Dan has shared and help you to achieve it, right? Because I think we need a lot more. We need thousands more of these murals around the country to start taking things back. So I'll pause there. Did you have anything that you want to add before I continue on?
The one thing I'll just plug, Silas, on that topic. If you guys want to get in touch with me specifically regarding this project and perhaps spearheading other ones, I'm happy to support you. I really don't have the resources or the time right now to actively be involved in any of these, but I'm more than happy to consult and to give you some guidance or direction if anyone listening to this now or in the future is interested. The is the site we're going to put in place. It's just going to be a very simple landing page that summarizes the project that we executed in Detroit and the success there. But it'll also give you an opportunity and a way to get in touch with me if you'd like to perhaps tag team, and if I can give you some support to execute this elsewhere. Because from the very beginning, I thought if we can do this in Detroit, we can pretty much do this anywhere. And if we are serious about the work of Catholic restoration, us Catholics need to take into account like what are the transcendentals of God? We talk about goodness, we talk about beauty, we talk about truth. Beauty, though, is like the one thing that I think our culture is sorely lacking right now. In the business world, I think there's no shortage of truth. Like good businesses have to focus on reality. I think good businesses also treat their customers and their employees well. That's the goodness side of it. But beauty, like we need to focus on injecting the world with more beauty. So the josephwall.org, if you want to, get in touch with me on that, I'm more than happy to share some notes and collaborate with you guys in the future.
Could you share a little bit more on this idea of like why this is important and specifically the side of responsibility, right? This idea of justice that we have to use our skills and our abilities and our ideas to move towards these things. Could you share more about that from your perspective?
Yeah, I've been thinking about these transcendental properties of God a lot lately, just in my own spiritual reading, and also how it applies to just my life as a husband, father, and as a professional. Those properties of God are also instilled in us insofar as we're made in the image of likeness of God. So, we're drawn towards the truth. We're drawn towards goodness. We're also drawn towards beauty. And the more we can in our own lives, in our own states and lives, the more we can align ourselves with what is good, what is true, and what is beautiful, the more fulfilled, the more energetic, the more vibrant our lives are. It's no surprise to anyone in the audience here that there's like a pandemic now of depression and anxiety, and the amount of people that are taking antidepressants is off the charts. And I would posit a theory that one of the leading causes of anxiety and depression that impacts people in their personal life and the professional life is because they don't have a strong grasp of goodness, truth, and beauty. And I would say beauty is one area where our culture is especially lacking. In Fulton Sheen's Life of Christ, he talks about that extensively, about how modern art is so devoid of beauty. We've really lost it. And at the time, he was talking about how church architecture had gotten so bland and simplistic, and it had lost so much of the ornamentation and the beauty that we'd seen in the Baroque and Renaissance periods and the medieval periods, where man created things that were transcendent, that brought our hearts and minds up to to contemplate the infinite, to contemplate Almighty God. And in a very real way, we as just individuals working on our salvation should do everything in our power to bring beauty into our life, to surround ourselves with beauty, both in the home, but also professionally, to make sure, and from a marketing standpoint, I talk about this with my team all the time. We want our branding and our products and the way we talk about our things and the way that we organize stuff to be well ordered and in a very real way beautiful, because these things are for human beings, yes, but like we are spiritual beings too. And in order to really develop things that resonate with the wholeness of the human person, we need to take into account beauty. And so that may be grandiose and very philosophical, but that was just something I've been contemplating a lot lately, and how those concepts of goodness, truth, and beauty, the more we can instill those in our own life personally and in professionally, the more fulfilled and I think ultimately effective and productive we are as human beings. And the more organization can internalize those things similarly, the more effective, productive, and fulfilled those organizations can be. Does that make some sense? Does that cover
Yeah,
kind of what you're
no, it
getting at?
does. I think that the other thing that you brought up that I guess I don't have a specific how to broach this topic, but the idea that a lot of people went away from really fancy churches because like, oh, that money could be given to the poor, and it's like, okay, yes, I understand that, but on the other hand, there is a sort of lack of wonder, or our minds are not constantly lifted to the divine the same way they used to be with the way churches are. I was just in San Francisco last week, and there's a couple really there's a Latin Mass church there that's really got a great community, but I was like, compared to this other really Gothic church I visited, it's
Mm,
like this is not like the beauty is not the same, right? I love the
right,
color
right.
blue, but there's a lot of blue and there's not a lot of ornamentation, right? And I was like, I was actually thinking about this a lot. I was like, how can we reinvigorate this idea that the frills and these so-called unnecessary are actually worth it, like worth us spending our money on versus, helping the homeless or something, right?
Well, a couple points I'll make on that. Let's not forget that when beautiful churches were constructed, they were not constructed for the elite. They were constructed for the entire town, community, city. And on top of that, it was also constructed primarily for God. And so, in my humble opinion, I think a lot of spiritual writers would agree with me on this. Building a beautiful church is first and foremost because man is putting the first fruits of his labor to glorifying and magnifying and worshiping Almighty God. While secondarily, you benefit your entire community, your entire town, your entire city by building something beautiful. So whether you're an aristocrat or you're a beggar on the street, you can be exposed to something that is transcendent, that is beautiful, that will raise your hearts and mind to God, and hopefully simultaneously raise your thoughts and mind to God, but also humble you because you recognize that at the end of the day, you are merely a human being created by God to serve Him. And so I hear. I hear the argument saying that yes, we should allocate these funds to caring for the homeless, but I would posit beauty is caring for the homeless. Beauty is food for the soul, and everyone needs that. Perhaps more so the elites, but I think also the impoverished and the poor need it just as much.
Yeah, I mean, it's also the idea of like you can receive some sort of inspiration from it because if you go into kind of one of those box churches, like it's not that you can't feel peace and beauty in there, right? But there is something about walking into, have you been to St. Mary's in Wausau? I think you have, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
that you walk into these places where it's like extremely extravagant, especially like in a place like Wisconsin, like middle of nowhere Wisconsin. Like we
Right,
have all this
right.
gold and silver leaf painting. Like there's something that strikes you about it that makes you want to come back, right? And this is the whole idea is that there are ways that we as business owners we talk about this, but just as humans in general, that if we're truly shining through the light of Christ, it will attract people. We don't have to smash it over their head. They'll be drawn into it, right? The churches, the way we live in virtue, truth, all these things. That's the reason why people come because they, like you said very, very nicely, that we are created in the image and likeness of God, which is truth and beauty. Therefore, we're drawn to it. So I think that's a really good point.
And secular people get this too, Silas. If you look at any Hollywood movie that has a scene with a Catholic priest in a Catholic church, it's not one of these 1960s very sterile, dull, right? Like they're setting it in, you know, a beautiful Romanesque or Gothic church, with like all the ornamentation, the statues and candles, and that's people get that. Like that
There's a
that
reason.
is beautiful. There's a reason. Even if you don't have religious, explicitly religious sensibility, people see the beauty in that, and they're drawn to it.
Yeah, I agree very much. Now I have to do some more thinking about this and if you see if we can come up with a framework to really help people understand this is the way. But a couple last things I want to touch before we wrap up here. Have you seen any specific fruits come out of it other than, hey, this was like a better location than we could have originally planned? Any specific things that you would share over the past, let's see, 7 months or so since it's been completed?
Yes, the short answer is yes. Can I give you actual measurable KPIs? No. The If I was to apply a marketing framework to what this initiative was, this was a very top of the funnel marketing campaign. It was very much about building the brand, and I hate using that kind of secular marketing lingo when it comes to you know work to support the church, but in a very real way. There's not an explicit call to action. There's not any sort of lead data that I can measure to prove the impact or the benefit of this. This is just one way in which we've injected beauty into a portion of the city that largely is cluttered with, at best, just bland, generic art.
Hmm.
Now, I will say, our church is absolutely packed. We are at capacity, and we were well attended before the mural, and I would say after the mural, we're even more attended. I mean, the Sunday masses, 7 a.m., 9 and 11, they're all basically standing room only, and there's a bunch of screaming, crying babies all over the place. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, our church is vibrant, and it was vibrant before this mural. But I would say that this mural is a manifestation of the health of our parish, and it's only going to reinforce the strength and the overall commitment and sphere of influence that our church has in the surrounding area. I will also say that we've gotten, surprisingly, there's been no graffiti, there's been no attempts to vandalize the thing, which I'm somewhat anticipating in the future, which perhaps should go to the business plan side of this initiative, because you should have funds allocated to maintain it and restore it. It's another reason why you need to have an experienced artist who knows the right materials and the right way to paint an exterior mural like that. I should have probably mentioned that earlier. But like, we've seen no vandalism. It's been well received by almost everybody that's commented on it, that I've seen. We got a number of positive news articles written over the course of the last several months, which is super awesome. Yeah, I would kind of say those are the measurables I have to this point. For the most part, this is the sort of quality activity that's going to be hard to explicitly demonstrate the results. But I will also say, it coincided with our acquisition of this new 5 acre parcel in the city right next to our parish, and the timing of those two things is quite providential. So I'm not going to say the mural is directly responsible for it, but the fact that they happened in such a similar time
Yeah.
frame, I don't know. I would like to say they work hand in hand.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there is such an importance to physically make the Catholic faith present again, because there's
Hmm.
churches, right? But people are used to seeing churches, right? What they're not used to seeing is large Eucharistic processions or rosary processions or murals, right? And I think that it's good to see these things. So let's do you have any other ideas for murals, but also other things that people could do if people are short on ideas, unlike us? What are some other ideas of how we can kind of like insert the Catholic culture back into the world?
Well, where do we start? I think first and foremost, all of us Catholics need to realize that our primary responsibilities are to Almighty God, and that first and foremost happens by being faithful to our state and life. And so I know you and I, Silas, are both married and with children now. That absolutely is priority A1. Nothing else is important when compared to that, the salvation of your own soul and the souls of your spouse and your children. Assuming you got that squared away, and you're working on having a great family life and providing for the material and spiritual necessities of your family, where do we go from there? I think for some people, it's just a matter of being faithful to their trade, their professional work, doing their best to be excellent in what they do, to perform their professional craft with virtue, and to allow their faith to give them the grace to grow professionally, and also to follow your ambitions, and to not be bashful about being ambitious. Ambition by itself is a good thing. It just needs to be directed towards the good, and make sure that it's in conjunction with your state in life and your salvation. But beyond that, like specific things that I'm interested in, I'm just trying to find new ways to expand the influence of my parish church. And I'm working on a number of real estate ventures to develop a real estate fund to begin acquiring properties adjacent to our church to encourage commercial work and businesses that are either owned by and operated by friends of the parish or members of the parish, and also places that people can live close by to the church, which was historically how that church worked. It used to be surrounded by German Catholics. That's long gone away, but we're trying to rebuild that. That's one initiative that I'm working on because it's an extension to my parish, and I strongly encourage everyone that's listening to really take a serious look at their involvement in their home parish. I think a lot of Catholics in recent generations have lost a certain commitment, or what's the word I'm looking for? They've lost. They've
Compunction.
I guess you should be loyal to your parish in a
Mm.
way where you should be really invested in it. It really is an extension of your family. And I think a lot of parish churches now, in part because a lot of people drive long distances to get there, especially those that want to get to the Latin Mass, for instance, or want to find a beautiful liturgy. Sometimes, unfortunately, it means you got to drive, which can be hard to really invest yourself in the parish community. But to the extent you can do that and to foster authentic community and do things to support your fellow parishioners, I actually think that that's more important than even in some cases your professional ambitions to a certain extent. Like really making sure that your parish home is good for your family, but also you're supporting your priest there as much as you can in a small way. So this initiative to help develop this real estate syndicate to begin acquiring property is something I'm doing to support the parish church and our priests. But then, like additionally, another little side project I'm working on because I dabble in Catholic Twitter, Catholic X as it's called now. I'm trying to encourage primarily working people that drive a desk for a living and spend their time on their laptops all day, like us, trying to remind them of the importance of the Angelus, this simple little 10-second prayer that spiritual writers have been encouraging us all to recite, just like the monastics, at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 p.m. to kind of bookend your day and have a mile marker in the middle of the day where just for a brief moment, you're reflecting on the incarnation and the fidelity of Our Lady. And taking just a brief moment to say those prayers, to say those three Hail Marys, for me, I find it to be incredibly grounding. And I've made it a habit of praying those, saying the Angelus 3 times a day throughout the course of my professional life. And recently, I developed a new initiative, a little mini project called Project Angelus, and if you're interested, you can search that up on Twitter or X and find it. And we are developing simple apps, and we've started with browser extensions that prompt people to say the Angelus. Yes, you could set your iPhone to, notify you at 12, or you could set a timer on your computer or Outlook or whatever. But the idea is we have a really simple extension that you can install that you can opt in to hear actual recorded bells from churches across the world at 6 a.m., 12, and 6 p.m. And it just prompts you, interrupts you, notifies you that it's time to pray. It rings the bells. If you so choose, you can also choose to not ring the bells. And then it will prompt you with the prayers in both English and Latin. So we rolled that out a couple weeks ago. We've already got 100 people that have downloaded it. We've got all 5-star reviews. And we're just doing our best to kind of drum up attention to it on Catholic Twitter because it's a very engaged place. And I think this little thing can go a long way to just keep us on the path, the straight and narrow. The craziness of modern business life, as I think we all know, is it's so chaotic and there's so many inputs and distractions. But having this just consistent prompt to say, hey, it's time to say the Angelus, focus on the most important things. Just for a brief moment and then get back to it. It's I think incredibly powerful. And on top of that, a lot of the Father Chad Ripperger, who's probably known to a lot of your audiences, he has a famous anecdote that I remember reading years ago, where he said um, that the recitation of the Angelus 3 times a day, in his experience as an exorcist, has like a 90% success rate of relieving people of any um, evil, diabolic temptations or influences. And just that little habit, that little 10-second prayer said 3 times a day, can have a tremendous benefit from all dimensions of the spiritual life. So I didn't mean to ramble on that topic too much, but those are just a few things that come to mind that I'm thinking about in terms of what small ways like we can work as professionals to advance the culture towards Christ.
Yeah, I mean, we need to make the time in our days, right? If you can't get to daily mass at the bare minimum, everybody can make time for the Angelus, right? So that's a
Amen.
that's a great one. I'll link the Chrome extension in the show notes. And then one last thing, we didn't prep to talk about this, but you mentioned it early on. Was you have lots of ideas, and sometimes you're trying to figure out when to work on those, and because sometimes they haunt you. For anybody who's listening to this and thinks, hey, they have an idea of how they could do something related to this topic of inserting the culture or inserting the Catholic faith back into the culture. How do you have any particular framework of knowing like, hey, this is when an idea really needs to be actioned and I have to stop ignoring it versus like saying, hey, I'm just too busy.
That's $1 million question, Silas. What's been really helpful for me over the years, and as I'm approaching middle age here and getting more seasoned as a professional in the knowledge worker space, as the great Peter Drucker coined the term, having good systems that can collect the ideas that come into your head and come across your desk is critical, especially say for entrepreneur types and driven business people that have to deal with the influx of ideas that they get either from their own inspiration or people on their team, organizations that they're affiliated with. You've got to find a way to capture all this stuff. And I think it's worth professionals taking some serious time, maybe even taking a retreat, throughout the course of the year to figure out how I'm organizing all of the stuff that comes my way. We all have regular areas of responsibility. We all have consistent, repetitive, routine projects. And then we've got a bunch of crazy initiatives and ideas and dreams and hopes and things that we'd like to execute on. And the reality is, we're just finite human beings. We only have so much time, we only have so much resources and so much energy. And when you get married and you have kids, you realize you have a lot less of that than you thought you did before. So these are all things that you learn as you progress in life. And what I'm learning is taking time to be really intentional about how you're organizing this information. There's a whole school of thought called personal knowledge management, and I won't get into it right now, but it's worth looking up and googling. There's a great subreddit on this. There's some great minds. Tiago Forte is one. Nick Milo is another. The great David Allen, Getting Things Done. They all have different frameworks for how to organize this stuff. I would encourage anyone that's interested in this topic to take a look at those guys and see if any of those frameworks that they propose speak to them. Because at the end of the day, our minds are really good at solving problems, but we're not good at organizing information, and we're not good at recalling stuff when we need it. And so it's important for us to have external tools and systems that can put all that stuff in the proper place so that we can put our time and attention to those things when is necessary, when we should. And so this is probably a more long-winded answer than you wanted, but I will say this. When you've got projects or ideas that come up that look really good, write it down, flesh it out as best as you can, and then probably put it aside. Let it cook, let it simmer a bit, revisit it. And then at a certain point in time, maybe it's weekly, maybe it's monthly, look at all the projects that you have going on currently. Look at all the dreams that you have, the aspirations, these crazy, big, hairy, ambitious goals, as I think Tim Collins says, Jim Collins. Like, you can't do it all at once. Some are more important than others. Some might actually inspire you more than others. Maybe those are the ones that actually should be taking the product focus. And then just be honest with yourself and say what you can and can't do. And just say, you know what? This is a great idea. It's not a 2025 project. It's probably not even 2026 project. I'm going to keep this over here. I'm going to let it simmer. I'm going to focus on these ones. And just the action of doing that intentionality, I've found can be a great stress reducer and can give you
Yeah.
give you the peace and the ability to focus on what you've intentionally decided are the most important areas of responsibility and areas that you should be focusing on. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, I think it's a good thing, and I just maybe one thing I would personally add to that is just if you are somebody who's not necessarily super action oriented, recognize that God put inside of us, all of us, a co-creative. We are creators basically in nature, right? Like we are creating His image and likeness. That includes beauty, but that also includes creation, right? As co-creators inside of the
Yeah.
creation He's made. So do not be lazy with that, right? Like if you have some
Yeah.
interest, especially if you're not prone to this, if maybe you return back to your faith and you're trying to tune out the waves of the world or some of the the entrepreneurship hustle stuff that people show you, realize that there is the reason that you have those inclinations, and that if you lean into those for God, He's going to reward you, right? And it might be hard, but He's still going to reward you.
You're exactly right. God made us, He made man in His image and likeness. And one of those key attributes is we are creators, just like
Hmm.
He is. And
Yeah.
He expects us to cooperate with His graces to manifest his being in the world. And you're exactly right.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of business. I mean, it really
Yeah.
is. Properly speaking, it's an extension of
Yeah.
God, and our
Absolutely, man.
cooperation with how we're created.
All right, man. Well, this has been great having you on.
Yeah,
Where can
dude.
people reach you? Any plugs you want to mention that we didn't cover yet, but where can people follow?
You can follow me on X and on LinkedIn. My handle is Daniel Egan 313. I just talk about what's on my mind, both in the spiritual life, family life, and business. Not as active on LinkedIn these days, but that will probably change in the near future. But X is where you can find the most about me. There's also a link to um, a mini podcast that I run. It's more of just like voice memos and notes to
I like
self
it.
that I make public. So you can see the link there in my bio on X. And then, like I mentioned before, if you go to the josephwall.org, you can find out more about the project we did in Detroit, as well as getting in touch with me if you want to talk about ways that I might be able to support further initiatives like that elsewhere in the country and in the world.
Absolutely, man. And then one day when we're billionaires, we can just, fund all these things.
Yeah, dude. That make it easy.
All right. God bless you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, brother. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this, leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast player. And if you're not already, give us a follow on YouTube so we can get to 1,000 subscribers. We got a long ways to go, but we're getting there slowly but surely. And then be sure to subscribe to the Saintly CEO, our weekly newsletter that in under 1,000 words will help you to learn how to run your business like a saint and help you discover other Catholic entrepreneurs with our curated list of these folks in the Heavenly Hustlers section. And then finally, if you are looking for a group of other Catholic entrepreneurs to learn from, to join, and to just get to know and have a bit of camaraderie, consider joining our peer group. It's called the Catholic Founders Guild. It's $10 a month or $100 a year. Just go to our Substack and then upgrade to paid. You'll get access to the community, to our directory of other members, as well as to all of our paywalled content. There should be some more of that coming, by the way, in the future. Currently, most of it's free, but anyways, it's a great group. We've got a really great group of people there that we're talking once a month and just sharing and learning a lot from each other. So I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and we'll see you next time on Catholic Founders.